"Useless, lazy woman! You do nothing but drag that filthy rag across the floor!" Veronica Anderson's voice cut through the mansion like a sharp blade. Mary kept scrubbing the Italian marble, her knees aching against the 1,200 per square foot flooring without raising her eyes. But when Robert Anderson discovered what his maid had been doing every night while his wife slept on Egyptian silk sheets, the truth shattered a 15-year marriage in less than 5 minutes. The mansion in Beverly Hills was worth $12 million. Every corner of that house screamed power and extravagance. Original Jackson Pollock paintings decorated the walls. A climate-controlled wine cellar stored bottles worth more than Mary's yearly salary. The chandelier in the main hall, imported from Murano, glittered above the scene of humiliation unfolding that Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Mary Sanchez was 42, her hands roughened by 3 years of cleaning that mansion, her hair pulled back into a simple bun, her navy blue uniform spotless despite the sweat dripping down her temples. Kneeling on the floor, she embodied everything Veronica despised: poverty, simplicity, resignation. Veronica Anderson, 38, circled the housekeeper like a predator sizing up its prey. A $20,000 Valentino dress, $5,000 Louboutin heels, and an $80,000 Hermes bag. Each piece of her outfit cost more than Mary would earn in years of hard work. The contrast was brutal, intentional, cruel. "Just look at her, everyone." Veronica gestured toward the 5 employees frozen in place: Carmen, the cook; John, the driver; Sylvia, the laundress; Peter, the gardener; Lucy, the maid. They all knew Mary. They all knew the accusation was unjust. None dared to speak. Robert Anderson watched from the library doorway, holding an 18-year-old whiskey. Tall, 45, wearing a $15,000 Armani suit and a $300,000 Patek Philippe watch. He had built a telecommunications empire from scratch. He judged people by character, not by their bank accounts. And something about this scene was deeply wrong. "You know what your problem is, Mary?" Veronica went on, her voice dripping venom. "You're lazy. Fundamentally lazy. 3 years working here, and I've never seen you do more than the bare minimum." Mary kept scrubbing. The circular motion of her hands on the floor was hypnotic, steady, as if she could wipe away not only the dirt from the marble, but also the words raining down on her. Soap bubbles burst into tiny rainbows under the sponge. She counted silently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe. Keep going. "Are you listening to me?" Veronica kicked over the bucket, spilling soapy water all over the freshly cleaned floor. "When I speak to you, look at me." Mary finally lifted her eyes. Brown, tired, but holding something more, a depth Veronica couldn't read, as if she knew something the others didn't. "Sorry, Mrs. Anderson." Her voice came out hoarse but controlled. "I'll clean it all again." "Of course you will. That's what I pay you for, isn't it?" Veronica turned to the others. "All of you get paid to work, but it seems some of you think you can just slack off." John, the driver, cleared his throat uneasily. He'd known Mary for 3 years. He knew she arrived at 6 in the morning and didn't leave until 6 at night. 12 hours of hard work. He had never seen her rest. "Mrs. Anderson," he began, but one sharp glare silenced him. "Does anyone have anything to say?" Veronica spun on her heels, staring each employee down. "Want to defend the lazy one? Fine! Then you can pack your things and leave with her." Silence fell again. Carmen lowered her eyes. Sylvia pretended to inspect a non-existent stain on a shirt. Peter looked out the window. Lucy fidgeted with her apron. None of them could afford to lose their jobs. They all had families to support. Robert took a step forward, then stopped. He'd known his wife for 17 years, married for 15. In the past 5 years, she had changed. Money, which should have brought security, had instead bred arrogance. Comfort had turned into cruelty. The woman he'd fallen in love with was buried under layers of designer labels and prejudice. You know what really irritates me? Veronica circled Mary again. The fact that you live in my house is a favor. You eat my food, use the water I pay for, and still have the audacity to be lazy. Mary lived in the back room, 6 by 9 feet, a twin bed, a small wardrobe, a tiny bathroom. In exchange, she worked 2 extra hours a day without pay. That was the deal. Housing for additional labor. I follow all my hours, ma'am, Mary whispered. Do you? Veronica laughed, a cold, metallic laugh. John, what time did you see Mary sleeping in her room last week? John swallowed hard. He had passed by her room at 3 in the afternoon on Tuesday. She wasn't sleeping. She was crying, holding a photo. But Veronica had twisted the story however she pleased. You know what? Veronica stopped right in front of Mary, still on her knees. I'm tired of this. Tired of paying a salary to someone who doesn't work properly? Mary stayed silent. Her hands, submerged in soapy water, trembled slightly. Not from fear, from something deeper. Robert noticed the tremor. He also noticed how she pressed her lips together as if keeping important words from slipping out. I'll make you a deal. Veronica pulled her phone from her Hermes bag and opened her banking app. $50,000. I see it right here in my account. $50,000 I can transfer right now. The employees gasped. $50,000 was more money than any of them would ever see at once. Carmen did the math. It was nearly 3 years of her salary. John thought of the used car he could finally buy. Sylvia imagined paying off her family's debts. I bet $50,000, Veronica continued, savoring every word, that you don't do anything useful in this house besides pretending to clean. I bet that if I dig deeper, I'll find you spend half the time sleeping and the other half stalling. Ma'am, Mary began, I'm not finished. Veronica raised her hand. If I'm wrong, if you prove you actually work, actually do something useful beyond dragging that filthy rag, I'll give you $50,000 right now, today. Robert frowned. He knew that tone in his wife's voice. It was the same one she used at social gatherings when she wanted to humiliate someone publicly. But this time, there was something different. An unnecessary cruelty, almost sick. And if you're right? Mary asked, her voice surprisingly steady. If I'm right. Veronica smiled. You pack your things and leave today. No severance, nothing. Get out of my sight forever. The silence in the mansion was absolute. Even the French clock on the wall, a $15,000 piece, seemed to stop ticking. The 5 employees barely breathed. Robert gripped his glass tightly, his knuckles turning white. Mary slowly stood up. Dirty water dripped from her hands onto the Italian marble. She looked Veronica in the eye for the second time that day. In her tired brown eyes there was now something else. Determination. I accept. The word came out clear, definitive. Veronica blinked, surprised. She expected pleading, tears, desperation, not calm acceptance. You accept? She laughed nervously. You just signed your own termination. Maybe. Mary slowly removed her apron. But you said today. That means we have until midnight to find out the truth. Midnight? Veronica glanced at her Cartier watch. 2:15 in the afternoon. Less than 10 hours for you to prove you're not a parasite. That's enough time. Mary folded the apron carefully. But let's make it clear. Everyone here is a witness. $50,000 if I prove I do something useful. Robert stepped closer to the group, his whiskey still untouched. Interesting bet. His deep voice filled the room. But how do we verify it? How do we prove who's right? Veronica turned to her husband, annoyed by the interruption. Simple. We'll review the security cameras. We've got them in every room except bathrooms and bedrooms. We can see exactly what Mary does or doesn't do. The cameras, Mary muttered under her breath. What was that? Veronica stepped closer. Afraid now? The cameras will show you sleeping on the living room couch, messing with my jewelry, sneaking food from the kitchen. The cameras record everything, Mary said louder. 24 hours a day. Exactly. Veronica clapped her hands theatrically. Your end has come. Robert set his glass down on the coffee table. The crystal hit the marble with a sharp echo. Then it settled. We'll review the recordings from the past few weeks. If Mary really doesn't work, she leaves today. If she proves she works. $50,000, Veronica finished. Pack your bags, Mary. Carmen couldn't stay silent any longer. Mrs. Anderson, with all due respect, Mary is the most dedicated employee in this house. Shut up, Carmen! Veronica exploded. Or do you want to leave with her? Calm down, Robert intervened. We'll do this properly. John, you know about computers. Can you download the recordings from the past 2 weeks? John nodded nervously. Yes, Mr. Anderson. The system saves everything in the cloud. I can have it ready in an hour. Perfect. Robert checked his watch. It's 2:20. At 3:30 we'll start the review. Everyone must be present. It's only fair. Unnecessary, Veronica protested. I can watch them myself. No. Robert's voice was firm. If we're doing this, we'll do it right. Total transparency. Mary stood still in the center of the room. Her hands, still damp from work, hung at her sides. But there was something in her posture, a calmness that unsettled Veronica deeply. Mary, Robert addressed her, do you have anything to say before we begin? Mary looked at each person in the room. Carmen, who always saved her a plate of food. John, who offered her rides when it rained. Sylvia, who lent her aspirin when the headaches were too strong. Peter, who left flowers at her door. Lucy, who shared afternoon coffee with her in quiet solidarity. Then she looked at Veronica, all her arrogance and cruelty wrapped in designer labels. Finally, at Robert, the man who had built an empire but couldn't see what was happening under his own roof. Just one thing, Mary said. When you watch the recordings, pay attention to the hours between 3 and 6 in the morning. The clock read 3:30 when everyone gathered again in the main hall. John had connected the laptop to the 85-inch screen, turning the wall into a window into the past. The recordings were neatly organized by date and time, 2 weeks of silent surveillance waiting to reveal their secrets. Mary stood apart from the group, her hands clasped in front of her like a student awaiting exam results. Veronica occupied the central armchair like a queen on her throne, legs crossed elegantly, an anticipatory smile of victory painted across her red lips. Robert chose to stand, leaning against the Carrara marble fireplace, watching both the screen and everyone's reactions. Something about Mary's calmness intrigued him deeply. It wasn't resignation, not even acceptance. It was as if she knew something that would change everything. Let's start with the basics, John announced, adjusting the video settings. These are the recordings from October 1st, beginning at 6 a.m., the time Mary starts her shift. The images showed Mary entering through the service door, always punctual, always in the same impeccable uniform. Her routine unfolded with military precision. The kitchen first, then the living room, the 3 guest bathrooms, the library, the dining room. Every movement was efficient, methodical, professional. Not once did she pause beyond the 15 minutes allotted for lunch. "Skip to the afternoon," Veronica ordered impatiently. "That's when she hides to nap." John fast-forwarded to 2 p.m. Mary was cleaning the second floor. At 3, she was organizing the pantry. 4 o'clock, washing the front windows. 5 o'clock, mopping the hallway. 6 o'clock, ending her shift and retreating to her small room. See? Carmen couldn't hold back. "Mary works all day without stopping." "Shut up," Veronica snarled. "John, show the nighttime recordings. I bet she sneaks out of her room to mess with things in the house." The cameras didn't cover the interior of the rooms, but they showed the hallways. From 6 p.m. to 11, nothing. Mary didn't appear. The small back room light stayed on until 10, then went dark. Silence until... "Stop there." Robert stepped closer to the screen. "Go back to 3 a.m. John rewound the video. 3:05 in the morning. The door to Mary's small room opened silently. She emerged, no longer in her work uniform, but in simple clothes, jeans and a t-shirt. She carried a bag that looked heavy, filled with something indiscernible. She walked the hallways with the ease of someone who knew every creaking board, every squeaking door, but she didn't head toward the kitchen or the main areas. She went upstairs to the forgotten third-floor corridor where the unused bedrooms were. What is she doing on the 3rd floor? Veronica shot up, her face losing its arrogant composure. There's nothing up there except empty rooms and... The words died on her lips. Robert finished the thought she couldn't bring herself to say. My father's room. Sebastian Moore, 78, Veronica's father, had lived on the 3rd floor for 2 years. After a devastating stroke, he had lost his speech and most of his mobility. Veronica had set him up on the farthest floor with a nurse who came 3 times a week during the day. In her words, it was the best she could do for a father she had never been close to. She visited once a month at most, staying no longer than 5 minutes. The footage continued. Mary entered Sebastian's room with movements soft, almost maternal. The hallway camera didn't capture the interior, but fragments were visible when the door stayed slightly open. John searched other angles and found one in the 3rd floor hall that caught a partial view of the room. What unfolded left everyone in absolute silence. Mary approached the bed where Sebastian lay. With infinite care, she checked his vital signs using devices she pulled from the bag, a blood pressure cuff, a pulse oximeter, a thermometer. She wrote everything down in a small notebook. Then the real work began. She gently repositioned the elderly man, propping him against pillows to prevent bed sores. She massaged his atrophied limbs with practiced precise movements, clearly learned through study and repetition. She administered complex medications, following a chart she had taped to the wall herself. Veronica was pale as paper. The nurse comes 3 times a week. She said he was stable. Mary finally broke her silence, her voice low but steady. The nurse comes 3 times a week, stays 2 hours, and leaves. A stroke patient bedridden like him needs constant care. Repositioning every 2 hours to prevent sores, daily physical therapy to maintain mobility, strictly controlled medication, assisted feeding, complete hygiene. Robert had John fast-forward the video. 3:30 a.m. Mary changed Sebastian's adult diapers. 4 a.m. Passive exercises on his arms and legs. 4:30. Preparing and administering tube feeding. 5 a.m. Checking vitals again. 5:30. Reading to him softly, holding his hand. 6 a.m. She left the room, returned to her quarters, showered quickly, and by 6:15 was in the kitchen, starting her official day of work as if nothing had happened. "Every day?" Robert asked, his voice breaking. Mary nodded. "Every day for 2 years, since I realized Mr. Sebastian wasn't receiving the care he needed." Lucy began to cry quietly. Peter shook his head in disbelief. Sylvia hugged herself, overcome with emotion. John stared at the screen, processing what he saw. Carmen already knew. She'd always sensed Mary was hiding something, but never imagined the scale of it. Robert grabbed the remote from John and navigated the recordings with meticulous determination. October 1st, 3 a.m., Mary with Sebastian. October 2nd, 3 a.m., Mary with Sebastian. 3rd, 4th, 5th of October, always the same, always dedicated. "Show October 7th, he ordered, recalling something. 3:15 a.m. The recording showed Mary entering Sebastian's room as usual, but something was different. The elderly man was agitated, his body trembling. Mary instantly recognized the signs of a seizure. Moving swiftly, she positioned him on his side, protected his head, timed the convulsion. When it passed, she obsessively checked his vitals. His blood pressure was dangerously high. Without hesitation, Mary administered the emergency medication she kept in her bag. She stayed with him for 3 straight hours, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat, until she was certain the danger had passed. "She saved his life," Robert whispered. "If she hadn't been there that night." Veronica sank into the armchair, her face a mask of shock and something close to horror. Not at her father's condition, but at the glaring magnitude of her own negligence. "Keep checking," she demanded weakly. "There must be something wrong. She must be stealing from him or—" Robert ignored his wife and focused elsewhere. He opened his personal laptop and accessed the house's external cameras. "John, can you sync these with the feeds?" John nodded, and within minutes the outdoor footage was split on screen with the indoor. October 10th, 2:45 a.m. A taxi stopped in front of the house. Mary left carrying the same heavy bag, this time also a backpack. She got in the cab and disappeared into the night. She returned at 5:15, heading straight to Sebastian's room. "Where did she go?" Robert asked rhetorically, already scrolling through more footage. The pattern repeated 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. Mary left for 2.5 hours, always returning before dawn. "Probably meeting someone." Veronica tried to regain control. "Using our house as a motel." Carmen couldn't take it anymore. "Mrs. Anderson, with all due respect, look at Mary. Look at her dark circles. Look at her exhaustion. This woman sleeps less than 4 hours a night for 2 years. Do you really think she sneaks out for fun?" Robert kept digging, now with a different suspicion. He grabbed his phone and made a quick call. "Charles, it's Robert. I need you to check something for me. St. Joseph's Pharmacy on Melrose Avenue. See if there's a customer named Mary Sanchez who buys regularly. Yes, now. It's urgent." While he waited, he kept scanning the footage. October 15th, different scene. Mary in Sebastian's room at 3 a.m., but this time she was crying. Holding his hand, shoulders shaking, whispering words the camera couldn't capture, but the emotion was clear. After a few minutes, she wiped her tears, checked his vitals, and carried on with her care routine. Robert's phone rang. He listened silently, only murmuring confirmations. When he hung up, his face was graver still. "St. Joseph's confirms," Robert announced, his voice slicing through the tense silence. "Mary Sanchez buys medication for Sebastian Moore 3 times a week, pays in cash. The drugs not covered by insurance cost about $3,000 a month." The silence that followed was deafening. $3,000 was more than half of Mary's salary. How could she afford it? John, acting on instinct, searched more recordings. He found footage of Mary in the kitchen at 2 a.m. Or preparing special purees, nutritious soups, each carefully labeled with date and time. Hours of extra work no one had ever known about. "There's more," Peter finally spoke. "I saw Mary several times leaving at 5 p.m. on Sundays. She said she was visiting a sick aunt, but she always came back at dawn on Monday, exhausted." Robert made another call, this time to a contact at St. Mary's Hospital. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. When it ended, he was visibly shaken. "Mary works as a cleaning assistant at St. Mary's Hospital on Sundays. 12-hour shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. She earns $600 a shift, $2,400 a month, money she uses entirely to buy Sebastian's medicine." Veronica shot up, walking to the window. She couldn't face anyone, especially not Mary. The truth was devastating. Her own father was alive because of the woman she humiliated daily, called lazy, a parasite. Carmen walked up to Mary and hugged her. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Mary returned the hug briefly before stepping back. "What would I say? That the daughter abandoned her father? That if it weren't for me, he would have died of neglect 2 years ago? That I spend my wages keeping alive a man who barely knows who I am?" Robert had John pull specific recordings. Last Christmas. The house was empty. The Andersons had gone to Aspen. The footage showed Mary climbing to Sebastian's room, carrying a small Christmas tree. She decorated the room with simple ornaments bought with her own money, played soft carols, prepared a special holiday meal he could take through the feeding tube, stayed with him until dawn, holding his hand so he wouldn't spend Christmas alone. New Year's, same story. Family in Paris, Mary with Sebastian, counting down to midnight, whispering wishes of recovery in his ear. His birthday, this March. Veronica had completely forgotten. Mary appeared with a small cake, softly sang "Happy Birthday," tears streaming down her face as she held his hand. "Why the tears?" Lucy asked, her voice breaking. Mary looked at her with a sad smile. "Because my father died when I was 15. Caring for Mr. Sebastian is like having a second chance to care for someone who needs it, even if he doesn't know who I am." Robert found one more revealing recording. Mary speaking to Sebastian during his care, her voice low but audible. "You're better today. Your blood pressure is back to normal. I got the new medication the doctor recommended. It was expensive, but it's worth it. You need to get better. Your daughter needs you, even if she doesn't know it yet." The revelations kept coming in a cascade. Mary had created a detailed medical journal noting every change, every improvement, every concern. She had learned physical therapy by watching YouTube videos on her old phone. She studied geriatric care in PDFs downloaded at a public computer lab. She had turned herself into a self-taught nurse out of necessity and compassion. The wall clock struck exactly midnight when Robert paused the recordings and turned to face everyone in the room. The silence that settled wasn't charged with anticipation anymore, but with a collective shame weighing on each person present. Mary had stood in the same place for hours, hands clasped before her, her face a mask of quiet dignity that clashed brutally with the emotional chaos around her. Veronica had moved away from everyone, leaning against the panoramic window overlooking the lit garden, her reflection showing a woman she no longer recognized. "I think we've seen enough," Robert said, his voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "But I want to show one last thing. John, pull up today's recording, 2 in the afternoon." The screen came back to life, showing the scene from earlier that day. Veronica yelling at Mary on her knees, calling her lazy, a parasite, useless. The contrast with everything they had just discovered was nauseating. Carmen had to look away. Peter shook his head in disbelief. Sylvia cried quietly. Lucy hugged herself. John kept his eyes fixed on the floor. $50,000! Robert repeated the amount of the bet, each word heavy with meaning. "You bet 50,000 that Mary did nothing useful in this house." He walked to the center of the room, placing himself between Mary and Veronica. For 3 years, this woman worked 12 hours a day here, another 4 hours every night caring for your father, another 12 hours every Sunday at the hospital to pay for his medications. That's 28 hours on Sundays. 16 hours on the other days. She's lived on less than 4 hours of sleep for 2 years. Robert picked up the remote and returned to a specific recording. Mary administering complex medication to Sebastian with the precision of a professional nurse. She taught herself geriatric care, physical therapy, nutrition for patients with feeding tubes, all to keep your father alive while you... He turned to Veronica, who still couldn't meet his gaze. "While you visited once a month for 5 minutes. His voice rose, years of frustration over his wife's transformation finally erupting. "Your father is alive because of the woman you humiliated, the one you called lazy, the one you treated like trash in front of everyone." Veronica finally turned to face the room, her expression a tangle of emotions fighting for dominance. Anger, shame, disbelief, but above all, the humiliation of being so completely exposed. Her mouth opened and closed several times, words dying before they formed. How do you defend the indefensible? How do you justify the unjustifiable? "She should have told me," Veronica managed at last, her voice weak and unconvincing. "If she was taking care of my father, she should have said something." Mary broke her long silence, taking a step forward for the first time in hours. "And what would you have done? Thanked me? Raised my pay? Or fired me for meddling where I wasn't asked?" There was no anger in her voice, only a profound sadness. "I've known you for 3 years. I know how you think. To you, I'm not a person. I'm a tool. An object that cleans your house. How could I trust you to understand?" Robert went to the bar and poured himself another whiskey, downing it in one go. "Mary's right. You've changed, Veronica. Money has turned you into someone I no longer recognize." He turned to the staff. "Did any of you know? Did you know what Mary was doing?" Carmen answered first. "I suspected she was caring for someone. I saw the exhaustion, the dark circles. But I didn't know it was Mr. Sebastian." John added his observation. "I saw her a few times buying expensive medication at the pharmacy. I offered help, but she always refused, said it was for a sick aunt." Peter raised his hand timidly. "Once I found Mary asleep standing up, leaning on the broom. When I woke her, she apologized and went back to work. Now I understand. She was exhausted. Sylvia had something too. I saw her hands, always with little cuts, sores. I thought it was from cleaning, but it was from needles, from giving injections, wasn't it?" Mary nodded silently. Robert turned to his wife with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't just anger or disappointment. It was worse. Final. You know what impresses me most? Mary never asked for anything, never complained, never used this as leverage. She simply did what needed to be done because it was right, because your father needed it, because she has something you lost along the way: humanity. The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the French clock. Each second amplified the weight of the exposed truth. Veronica had bet $50,000 thinking she'd humiliate Mary for good. Instead, she exposed her own cruelty, her neglect of her father, her utter lack of compassion. The bet, Veronica said suddenly, grasping at any shred of control. Technically, she wasn't doing housework during the night. She was caring for my father, which isn't part of her duties. The silence that followed was different. Not shock or surprise, but pure contempt. All the employees looked at Veronica as if seeing her for the first time, and what they saw disgusted them deeply. Robert set his glass down so hard the crystal cracked. "Are you really trying to wriggle out of the bed after all this?" His voice was dangerously low. "After learning that this woman saved your father's life multiple times, that she spent every spare dollar on his medications, that she sacrificed her health, her sleep, her life to care for someone you abandoned." Mary took another step forward, now facing Veronica directly. "You're right. Caring for your father wasn't my job. It was a choice. A choice I made every day for 2 years. While you chose to ignore, I chose to care. While you chose to travel to Aspen and Paris, I chose to spend Christmas and New Year's with him. While you chose to drop $80,000 on a handbag, I chose to spend $3,000 a month on medicine to keep him alive." Every word from Mary was a slap across Veronica's face. Naked truth. No frills, no needless accusations, just facts weaving a devastating narrative. "Do you know why your father is alive?" Mary went on, her voice gathering a strength no one had heard before. "Because on October 7th, he had a seizure at 3:15 in the morning. If I hadn't been there, he would have died. On November 23rd, he stopped breathing. I performed CPR for 15 minutes until he came back. On January 12th, the feeding tube clogged. I flushed and cleared it, preventing an infection that could have been fatal." Robert pulled out his phone and began typing quickly. "I'm transferring $100,000 to your account right now, Mary. $50,000 from the bet you won without question. Another $50 as a start toward repaying what you've done for Sebastian." Veronica whirled to face her husband. "You can't do that. It's our money." Robert looked at her with an expression that made her step back. "Ours? Our money? The money I earned building my company while you became this unrecognizable person? No, Veronica, it's not ours. And after today, a lot is going to change in this house." Mary shook her head. "I don't want the extra money, Mr. Anderson. The bet was $50,000. That's what I'll accept," Robert insisted. "Mary, you spent much more than that caring for Sebastian. It's the least we can do." Mary held firm. "The least you can do is start truly taking care of him. Money doesn't erase 2 years of abandonment. It doesn't buy love or compassion. Mr. Sebastian doesn't need money. He needs his daughter." The chime confirming the bank transfer on Mary's phone broke the tense silence in the room. $50,000 had been deposited into her account, the exact amount of the bet Veronica had arrogantly proposed hours earlier. Mary stared at the screen for a long moment, as if she couldn't believe those numbers were real. It was more money than she had ever seen at once, more than she could save in 10 years of honest work. Robert didn't stop there. He picked up the landline and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Dr. Carter, it's Robert Anderson. I know it's late, but I need you at my house now. It's about Sebastian Moore, my father-in-law. Yes, it's urgent. Bring your team. We're going to do a full evaluation and overhaul his treatment. Cost is not an issue." While Robert arranged for a full medical team, Mary approached with a folder no one had noticed. It was Sebastian's medical journal, 2 years of meticulous notes on every aspect of his health. "You'll need this," she said, handing it over. "Everything is here. Every medication, every crisis, every improvement. The doctors will want to see it." Robert flipped through the pages, impressed by the level of detail. Hand-drawn blood pressure charts, medication tables, observations about reactions to different treatments. It was the work of a dedicated professional, not of a housekeeper who had learned medicine out of necessity. "Mary," Robert said, closing the folder carefully, "I want to make you an offer, not as your employer, but as someone who recognizes what you've done. I want you to be Sebastian's official caregiver. Specialized nurse's salary, $25,000 a month with full benefits. Comprehensive health insurance, year-end bonus, paid vacation. And I want you to enroll in a geriatric nursing program. I'll pay for everything." Veronica watched as if trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The world she'd built on arrogance and money was crumbling brick by brick, and she had no power to stop it. "Robert," she tried one last time, her voice stripped of its former force, "you can't make these decisions alone. This is our house, our money, our life." Robert turned to her with a calm more frightening than any outburst. "Our life? Veronica, what life? The life where you humiliate employees for sport? Where you abandon your own father? Where you spend $80,000 on a handbag while Mary spends $3,000 of her wages to keep your father alive?" The silence that followed was final. Robert walked to the desk and pulled a sheet of letterhead. He began to write with the same determination with which he had built his empire. "I'm creating the Sebastian Moore Foundation for Invisible Caregivers, initial capital of $5 million. Mary will be the executive director. The goal is to identify and support caregivers who, like Mary, sacrifice their lives to care for the elderly and the ill without recognition or adequate pay." He signed the document and handed it to Mary, who received it with trembling hands. "Mr. Anderson, this is too much. I don't know how to run a foundation." Robert smiled for the first time that night. "You managed Sebastian's life for 2 years with minimal resources, managed your own survival on 4 hours of sleep a day. You're the most qualified person I know for this role." Carmen, John, Sylvia, Peter, and Lucy watched with a mix of admiration and relief. Finally, after years of witnessing injustices in that house, they were seeing justice prevail. Mary, the humblest among them, was being elevated not out of favor or charity, but on merit, for demonstrating a humanity money couldn't buy. The world had turned completely in less than 12 hours, and at the center of that transformation stood a woman who chose love over indifference, care over abandonment, compassion over cruelty.